Viewer discretion is advised. This content is for education and entertainment purposes. Any opinions are the opinion of hosts or guests and not the opinion of employers.
Hey, Ousters and everyone tuning in. As always, thank you for joining Oust Now Presents. This is us, where we will be talking about Shirley Chisholm this episode. Are you ready?
Always.
Okay. Shirley Anita St. Hill was born to immigrant parents on November 30th, 1924, in Brooklyn, New York City. She was of Afro Guyanese and Afro Barbadian descent. Barbadian descent. She had three younger sisters, two born within 3 years of her and one later. Her father, Charles Christopher St. Hill, was born in British British Guyana before moving to Barbados. He arrived in New York City via Antigua, Cuba in 1923. Her mother, Ruby Seal, was born in Christchurch, Barbados, and arrived in New York City in 1921.
Charles St. Hill was a laborer who worked in a factory that made burlap bags and as a baker's helper. Ruby St. Hill was a skilled seamstress and domestic worker who experienced the difficulty of working outside the home while simultaneously raising her children. As a consequence, in November 1929, when Shirley was turned 5, she and her two sisters were sent to Barbados on the MS Volcania to live with their maternal grandmother, Emmeline Seal.
Shirley later said, Granny gave me strength, dignity, and love. I learned from an early age that I was somebody. I didn't need the Black Revolution to teach me that. Shirley and her sisters lived on their grandmother's farm in the Vonks Hill village in Christchurch, where Shirley attended a one-room schoolhouse. She returned to the United States in 1934, arriving in New York on May 19th on board the SS Nerissa. That's a pretty name.
Mhm. As a result of her time in Barbados, Shirley spoke with a West Indian accent throughout her life. In her 1970 autobiography, Unbought and Unbossed, she wrote, "Years later, I would know what an important gift my parents had given me by seeing to it that I had my early education in the strict, traditional British style schools of Barbados. If I speak and write easily now, that early education is the main reason. In addition, she belonged to the Quaker Brethren sect found in the West Indies, and religion became important to her. However, later in life, she attended services in a Methodist church. As a result of her time on the island, and despite her US birth, she would always consider herself a Barbadian American.
Beginning in 1934, she attended girls' high school in the Bedford Stuyvesant neighborhood of Brooklyn, a high regarded integrated school that attracted girls from throughout Brooklyn. She did well academically at Girls High and was chosen to be vice president of the Junior Arista Honor Society. She was accepted and offered scholarships to Vassar College and Oberlin College, but the family could not afford the room and board costs to go to either school. Instead, she selected Brooklyn College, where there were no charges for tuition and she could live at home and commute to the school.
She earned her Bachelor's of Art from Brooklyn College in 1946, majoring in sociology and minoring in Spanish, a language that she would employ at times during her political career. She won prizes for her debating skills and graduated cum laude. During her time at Brooklyn College, she was a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and the Harriet Tubman Society. As a member of the Harriet Tubman Society, she advocated for inclusion, specifically in terms of the integration of Black soldiers in the military during World War II. The addition of courses that focused on African American history and the involvement of more women in the student government. However, this was not her first introduction to activism or politics. Growing up, she was surrounded by politics as her father was an avid supporter of Marcus Garvey and a dedicated supporter of the rights of trade union members. She saw her community advocate. She saw her community advocate. She saw her community. She saw her community advocate for its rights as she witnessed the Barbados workers and anti-colonial independence movement.
She met Comrade O. Chisholm in the late 1940s. He had migrated to the United States from Jamaica in 1946, and later he became a private investigator who specialized in negligent based lawsuits. They married in 1949 in a large West Indian style wedding. She subsequently suffered two miscarriages, and to their disappointment, the couple would have no children. Although, in the view of scholar Julie Gallagher, it is possible that her career goals played a role in this outcome as well. After graduating from college, Chisholm began working as a teacher's aide at Mount Calvary Child Care Center in Harlem. She would work at the center in in a teaching role from 1946 to 1953. Meanwhile, she was furthering her education, attending classes at night and earning her Master of Arts in Childhood Education from Teachers College of Columbia University in 1951.
Chisholm entered the world of politics in 1953 when she joined Wesley Mack Holder's effort to elect Louis Flagg Jr. to the bench as the first Black judge in Brooklyn. The Flagg election group later transformed into the Bedford Stuyvesant Political League. The BSPL pushed candidates to support civil rights, fought against racial discrimination in housing, and sought to improve economic opportunities and services in Brooklyn. Chisholm eventually left the group around 1958 after clashing with Holder over Chisholm's push to give female members of the group more input in decision making.
She also worked as a volunteer for white dominated political clubs in Brooklyn, like the Brooklyn Democratic Club and the League of Women's Voters. With the political league, she was part of a committee that chose the recipients of its annual Brotherhood Award. She also was a representative of the Brooklyn branch of the National Association of College Women within the political organizations that she joined. Right. Chisholm sought to make meaningful changes to the structure and make up of the organizations, specifically the Brooklyn Democratic Club, which resulted in her being able to recruit more people of color into the 17th District Club and thus local politics.
In 1960, Chisholm joined a new organization, the Unity Democratic Club, led by former campaign member Thomas R. Jones. The UDC's membership was mostly middle class, racially integrated, and included women in leadership roles. Chisholm campaigned for Jones, who lost the election for an assembly seat in 1960, but ran again after 2 years and won, becoming Brooklyn's second Black assemblyman.
After Jones accepted a judicial appointment rather than to seek re-election, Chisholm sought to run for his seat in the New York State Assembly in 1964. Chisholm faced resistance based on her sex, with the UDC hesitating to support a female candidate. Chisholm chose to appeal directly to women, including using her role as Brooklyn branch president of Key Women of America to mobilize female voters. Chisholm won the sorry. Chisholm won the Democratic primary in June 1964. She then won the seat in December with over 18,000 votes over Republican and Liberal Party candidates, neither of whom received more than 1,900 votes. You did that.
Go ahead. Chisholm was a member of the New York State Assembly from 1965 to 1968, sitting on the 175th, 176th, and 177th New York State legislatures. By May 1965, she had already been honored in a Salute to Women Doers affair in New York.
Whew. Her success in legislature included getting unemployment benefits extended to domestic workers. She also sponsored the she also sponsored the introduction of Sikh programs, Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge to the state, which provided disadvantaged students with the chance to enter college while receiving intensive remedial education. In August 1968, she was elected as the Democratic National Committee woman from New York State.
Fun fact, I was actually part of the Seek program when I went to college because my math scores were so low that I had to, it wasn't like it was barely passing, but passing type thing.
I got you.
But I was able to go to college with this program. I just had to do summer. I had to do summer school in college before I started my actual first semester. Um, So I don't know if that program is still active because this was a very long time ago.
Well,
It worked, it gave me an opportunity for college that, I ended up squandering, but hey, whatever. Anyway, um
they actually have a similar program like that right now.
mhm,
Um, Not that I'm advocating for it in any way, but for the military, for people that can't seem to pass the ASVAB
mhm,
test at a high enough score for either getting in or maybe even if they got enough to get in, but they want to get a better job placement
mhm.
while they're in the military. They can actually be there starting their basic, but they're helping them study so that way they can pass the ASVAB and
Yeah.
get better scoring. Um, and then they go to basic and actually start, but they still get I don't want to say they get credit, but they get time, if that makes sense. So they probably have more time in the military than somebody just going straight to basic.
Okay.
Eh,
Oh yeah, that makes
you know
sense.
what I'm trying to
I
say?
gotcha.
Yeah.
I gotcha. In 1968, Chisholm ran for the U.S. House of Representatives from New York's 12th congressional district, which, as part of a court mandated reproportionment plan, had been significantly redrawn to focus on Bedford Stuyvesant and was thus expected to result in Brooklyn's first Black member of Congress, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., in 1945. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. had, in 1945, become the first Black member of Congress from New York City as a whole. As a result of the redrawing, the white incumbent in the 4th 12th representative, Edna F. Kelly, sought re-election in a different district. Chisholm announced her candidacy around January 1968 and established some early organizational support.
Her campaign slogan was "Unbrought and Unbossed." In the June 18 Democratic primary, Chisholm defeated two other Black opponents, State Senator William S. Thompson and Labor official Dolly Robinson. And in the general election, she staged an upset victory over James Farmer, the former director of the Congress of Racial Equality, who was running as a Liberal Party candidate with Republican support, winning by an approximately 2-1 margin. Chisholm thereby became the first Black woman elected to Congress and was the only woman in the first year class that year.
Speaker of the House John W. McCormick assigned Chisholm to serve on the House Agricultural Committee. Given her, I'll say
Hmm.
this in the end. Speaker of the House John W. McCormick assigned Chisholm to serve on the House Agricultural Committee. Given her urban district, she felt that the placement was irrelevant to her constituents. When Chisholm confided to Rebbe Menachem, Rebbe Menachem M. Schneerson, that she was upset and insulted by her assignment, Schneerson suggested that she use the surplus food to help the poor and hungry. Chisholm subsequently met Bob Dole and worked to expand the food stamp program. She later played a critical role in the creation of the Special Supplement Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, now known as WIC. Thank you, Shirley. Chisholm would credit Schneerson for the fact that so many poor babies now have milk and poor children have food. Chisholm was then also placed on the Veterans Affairs Committee.
Soon later, she voted for Hale Boggs. Soon after, she voted for Hale Boggs as House Majority Leader over John Conyers. As a reward for her support, Boggs assigned her to the much prized Education and Labor Committee, which was her preferred committee. She was the third highest ranking member of this committee when she retired from Congress. Initially, Chisholm only hired women for her office. Half of them were Black. In later years, she did hire some men for both her Washington office and the one in her Brooklyn district. Chisholm said that she had faced much more discrimination during her New York legislative career because she was a woman than for her race.
In 1971, Chisholm served as a founding member of both the Congressional Black Caucus and the National Women's Political Caucus. In January 1971, Chisholm was one of 74 U.S. representatives to co sponsor the House version of the Health Security Act, a bipartisan universal health care bill that supported the creation of a government health insurance program to cover every person in America.
In May 1971, Chisholm and fellow New York Congresswoman Bella Abzug introduced a bill to provide $10 billion in federal funding for child care services by 1975. A less expensive version introduced by Senator Walt Mondale eventually passed the House and the Senate as a comprehensive child development bill, but it was vetoed in December 1971 by President Richard Nixon, who said that it was too expensive and would undermine the institution of the family.
Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm was born in 1924 and died in 2005 at the age of 81. Chisholm had a long career in politics and made history as the first Black woman elected to Congress. Chisholm, a Democrat, was also the first Black woman to compete for a presidential nomination from a major political party, when in 1972 she challenged George McGovern and Hubert Humphrey for the honor. Born and raised primarily in New York, Shirley Chisholm earned her undergraduate degree from Brooklyn College and then received a master's degree in elementary education from Columbia University. In 1964, Chisholm was elected to the New York State Legislature, and in 1968 she was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from New York's 12th Congressional District. Chisholm was a member of the House from 1969 through 1982 and served on the Education and Labor Committee, among others. From 1977 to 1981, she served in the elected position of Secretary of the House Democratic Caucus. Shirley Chisholm staffed her congressional office with women only. She often said that over her political career, she faced more discrimination for being a woman than she did for being Black. The Black Woman in Contemporary America, June 17, 1974.
Ladies and gentlemen, and brothers and sisters all, I'm very glad to be here this evening. I'm very glad that I've had the opportunity to be the first lecturer with respect to the topic of the Black woman in contemporary America. This has become a most talked about topic and has caused a great deal of provocation and misunderstandings and misinterpretations. And I come to you this evening to speak on this topic not as any scholar, not as any academician, but as a person that has been out here for the past 20 years trying to make my way as a Black and a woman and meeting all kinds of obstacles. The Black woman's role has not been placed in its proper perspective, particularly in terms of the current economic and political upheaval in America today. Since time immemorial, the Black man's emasculation resulted in the need of the Black woman to assert herself in order to maintain some semblance of a family unit. And as a result of this historical circumstance, the Black woman has developed perseverance. The Black woman has developed strength. The Black woman has developed tenacity of purpose and other attributes which today quite often are being looked upon negatively. She continues to be labeled a matriarch. And this is indeed a played upon white sociological interpretation of the Black woman's role that has been developed and perpetrated by Daniel Moynihan and other sociologists. Black women, by virtue of the role they have played in our society, have much to offer towards the liberation of their people. We know that our men are coming forward, but the Black race needs the collective talents and the collective abilities of Black men and Black women who have vital skills to supplement each other. It is quite perturbing to divert ourselves on the dividing issue of the alleged fighting that absorbs the energies of black men and black women. Such statements as the black woman has to step back while her black man steps forward, and the black woman has kept back the black man, are grossly historically incorrect and serves as a scapegoating technique to prevent us from coming together as human beings, some of whom are black men and some are black women. The consuming interests of this type of dialogue abets the enemy in terms of taking our eyes off the ball so that our collective talents can never redound in a beneficial manner to our ethnic group. The black woman who is educated and has ability cannot be expected to put said talent on the shelf when she can utilize these gifts side by side with her man. One does not learn, nor does one assist in the struggle by standing on the sidelines, constantly complaining and criticizing. One learns by participating in the situation, listening, observing, and then acting. It is quite understandable why black women in the majority are not interested in walking and picketing a cocktail lounge, which historically has refused to open its doors a certain 2 hours a day, when men who have just returned from Wall Street gather in said lounge to exchange bits of business transactions that occurred on the market. This is a middle-class white woman's issue. This is not a priority of minority women. Another issue that black women are not overly concerned about is the MS versus the MRS label. For many of us, this is just the use of another label which does not basically change the fundamental inherent racial attitudes found in both men and women in this society. This is just another label, and black women are not preoccupied with any more label syndromes. Black women are desperately concerned with the issue of survival. In a society in which the Caucasian group has never really practiced the espousal of equalitarian principles in America. An aspect of the women's liberation movement that will and does interest many black women is the potential liberation, is the potential nationalization of daycare centers in this country. Black women can accept and understand this agenda item in the women's movement. It is important that black women utilize their brain power and focus on issues in any movement that will redound to the benefit of their people, because we can serve as a vocal and a catalytic pressure group within these so-called humanistic movements, many of whom do not really comprehend the black man and the black woman. An increasing number of black women are beginning to feel that it is important first to become free as women in order to contribute more fully to the task of black liberation. Some feel that black men, like all men, or most men, have placed women in the stereotypes of domestics whose duty it is to stay in the background, cook, clean, have babies, and leave all of the glory to men. Black women point to the civil rights movement as an example of a subtle type of male oppression, where, with few exceptions, black women have not had active roles in the forefront of the fight. Some, like Coretta King, Catherine Cleaver, and Betty Shabazz, have come only to their positions in the shadows of their husbands. Yet, because of the oppression of black women, they are strongest in the fight for liberation. They have led the struggle to fight against white male supremacy dating from slavery times. And in view of these many facts, it is not surprising that black women played a crucial role in the total fight for freedom in this nation. Ida Wells kept her newspaper free by walking the streets of Memphis, Tennessee in the 1890s with 2 pistols on her hips. And within recent years, this militant tradition of black women who have been stifled because of racism and sexism has been carried on by Mary McLeod Bethune, Mary Church Carroll, Daisy Bates, and Diane Nash. The black woman lives in a society that discriminates against her on 2 counts. The black woman cannot be discussed in the same context as her Caucasian counterpart because of the twin jeopardy of race and sex which operates against her and the psychological and political consequences which attend them. Black women are crushed by cultural restraints and abused by the legitimate power structure. To date, neither the black movement nor women's liberation succinctly addresses itself to the dilemma confronting the black who is female. And as a consequence of ignoring or being unable to handle the problems facing black women themselves are now becoming socially and politically active. Undoubtedly, black women are cultivating new attitudes, most of which will have political repercussions in the future. They are attempting to change their conditions. The maturation of the civil rights movement by the mid-60s enabled many black women to develop interest in the American political process. From their experiences, they learned that the real sources of power lay at the root of the political system. For example, black sororities and pressure groups like the National Council of Negro Women are adept at the methods of participatory politics, particularly in regard to voting and organizing. And with the arrival of the 70s, young black women are demanding recognition like the other segments of our society who also desire their humanity and their individual talents to be noticed. The tradition of the black woman in the Afro-American subculture and her current interest in the political process indicate the emergence of a new political entity. Historically, she has been discouraged from participating in politics, and thus she is trapped between the walls of the dominant white culture and her own subculture, both of which encourage deference to men. Both races of women have traditionally been limited to performing such tasks as opening envelopes hanging up posters and giving teas. And the minimal involvement of black women exists because they have been systematically excluded from the political process, and they are members of the politically dysfunctional black lower class. Thus, unlike white women who escape the psychological and sociological handicaps of racism, the black woman's political involvement has been a most marginal role. But within the last 6 years, the Afro-American subculture has undergone tremendous social and political transformations, and these changes have altered the nature of the black community. Active protest. They are beginning to realize their capacities not only as blacks, but also as women. They are beginning to understand that their cultural well-being and their social well-being would only be affirmed in connection with the total black struggle. The dominant role black women played in the civil rights movement began to allow them to grasp the significance of political power in America. So obviously, black women who helped to spearhead the civil rights movement would also now at this juncture join and direct the vanguard which would shape and mold a new kind of political participation. This has been acutely felt in urban areas which have been rocked by sporadic rebellions. Nothing better illustrates the need for black women to organize politically than their unusual proximity to the most crucial issues affecting black people today. They have struggled in a wide range of protest movements to eliminate the poverty and injustice that permeates the lives of black people. In New York City, for example, welfare mothers and mothers of school children have ably demonstrated the commitment of black women to the elimination of the problems that threaten the well-being of the black family. Black women must view the problems of cities such as New York not as urban problems, but as the components of a crisis without whose elimination our family lives will neither survive nor prosper. Deprived of a stable family environment because of poverty and racial injustice, disproportionate numbers of our people must live on minimal welfare allowances that help to perpetuate the breakdown of family life. And in the face of the increasing poverty besetting black communities, black women have a responsibility. Black women have a duty to bequeath a legacy to their children. Black women have a duty to move from the periphery of organized political activity into its main arena. I say this on the basis of many experiences. I travel throughout this country, and I've come in contact with thousands of my black sisters in all kinds of conditions in this nation. And I've said to them over and over again, it is not a question of competition against black men or brown men or red men or white men in America. It is a question of the recognition that since we have a tremendous responsibility in terms of our own families, that to the best of our ability we have to give everything that is within ourselves to give in terms of helping to make that future a better future for our little boys and our little girls, and not leave it to anybody. Francis Beale describes the black woman as a slave of a slave. Let me quote: "By reducing the black man in America to such abject oppression, the black woman had no protector, and she was used, and is still being used, as in some cases, as the scapegoat for the evils that this horrendous system has perpetrated on black men. Her physical image has been maliciously maligned. She has been sexually molested and abused by the white colonizer. She has suffered the worst kind of economic exploitation, having been forced to serve as the white woman's maid and wet nurse for white offspring, while her own children were more often starving and neglected. It is the depth of degradation to be socially manipulated, physically raped, and used to undermine your own household, and then to be powerless to reverse this syndrome. However, Susan Johnson notes a bit of optimism, because Susan, a brilliant young black woman, has said that the recent strides made by the black woman in the political process is a result of the intricacies of her personality. And that is to say, as a political animal, she functions independently of her double jeopardy. Because confronted with the matrifocal past and present, she's often accused of stealing the black male's position in any situation beyond that of housewife and mother. And if that were not enough to burden the black woman, she realizes that her political mobility then threatens the doctrine of white supremacy and male superiority so deeply embedded in the American culture. So choosing not to be a victim of self-paralysis, the black woman has been able to function in the political spectrum. And more often than not, it is the subconsciousness of the racist mind which perceives her as less harmful than the black man, and thus permits her to acquire the necessary leverage for political mobility. This subtle component of racism could prove to be essential to the key question of how the black woman has managed some major advances in the American political process. It is very interesting to note that everyone, with the exception of the black woman herself, has been interpreting the black woman. It is very interesting to note that the time has come that black women can and must no longer be passive, complacent recipients or whatever the definitions of the sociologists, the psychologists, and the psychiatrists will give to us. Black women have been maligned, misunderstood, misinterpreted. Who knows better than Shirley Chisholm? And I stand here tonight to tell to you, my sisters, that if you have the courage of your convictions, you must stand up and be counted. I hope that the day will come in America when this business of male versus female does not become such an overriding issue, so that the talents and abilities that the Almighty God has given to people can be utilized for the benefit of humanity. One has to recognize that there are stupid white women and there are stupid white men, stupid black women and stupid black men, brilliant white women and brilliant white men, and brilliant black women and brilliant black men. Why do we get so hung up in America on this question of sex? Of course, in terms of the black race, we understand the historical circumstances. We understand also some of the subtle maneuverings and machinations behind the scenes in order to prevent black women and black men from coming together as a race of unconquerable men and women. And I just want to say to you tonight, if I say nothing else, I would never have been able to make it in America if I had paid attention to all of the doomsday criers about me. And I want to say, in conclusion, that as you have this conference here for the next 2 weeks, put the cards out on the table and do not be afraid to discuss issues that perhaps you have been sweeping under the rug because of what people might say about you. You must remember that once we are able to face the truth shall set all of us free. And we must and in conclusion, I just want to say to you, black and white, north and east, south and west, men and women, the time has come in America when we should no longer be the passive, complacent recipients of whatever the morals or the politics of a nation may decree for us in this nation. Forget traditions. Forget conventionalisms. Forget what the world will say, whether you're in your place or out of your place. Stand up and be counted. Do your thing, looking only to God, whoever your God is, and to your consciences for approval. I thank you.
Chisholm began exploring her presidential candidacy in July 1971 and formally announced her presidential bid on January 25th, 1972, in a Baptist church in her district in Brooklyn. There, she called for a bloodless revolution at the forthcoming Democratic nominating convention for the 1972 U.S. presidential election. Chisholm became the first African American to run for a major party's nomination for President of the United States, making her also the first woman ever to run for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. U.S. Senator Margaret Chase Smith, having previously run for the 1964 Republican presidential nomination. In her announcement, Chisholm, describing herself as representative of the people, and offered a new articulation of American identity. I am not the candidate of Black America, although I am Black and proud. I am not the candidate of the women's movement of this country, although I am a woman and equally proud of that. I am the candidate of the people, and my presence before you symbolizes a new era in American political history.
Her campaign was underfunded, only spending 300,000 in total. She also struggled to be regarded as a serious candidate instead of as a symbolic political figure. The Democratic political establishment ignored her, and her Black male colleagues provided little support. She later said, when I ran for Congress, when I ran for president, I met more discrimination as a woman than for being Black. Men are men. And particularly, she expressed her frustration about the Black matriarch thing, saying, they think I am trying to take power from them. The Black man must step forward, but that doesn't mean the Black woman must step back. Her husband, however, was fully supportive of her candidacy and said, I have no hangups about a woman running for president. Security was also a concern, as during the campaign, 3 confirmed threats were made against her life. Conrad Chisholm served as her bodyguard until U.S. Secret Service protection was given to her on May 1972.
Chisholm skipped the initial March 7 New Hampshire contest, instead, focusing on the March 14 Florida primary, which she thought would be receptive due to its Blacks, youths, and strong women's movement. But due to organizational difficulties and congressional responsibilities, she only made 2 campaign trips there and ended with 3.5% of the vote for a 7th-place finish. Chisholm had difficulties gaining ballot access, but campaigned and received votes in primaries in 14 states. Her largest number of votes came in the June 6 California primary, where she received 157,435 votes for 4.4% and a 4th-place finish, while her best percentage on a competitive primary came in May 6 North Carolina contest, where she got 7.5% of a 3rd-place finish. Overall, she won 28 delegates during the primaries process itself. Chisholm's base of support was ethnically diverse and included the National Organization for Women. Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem attempted to run as Chisholm delegates in New York. Although during the primary season, she received 430,703 votes, which was 2.7% of the total of nearly 16 million cast, and represented 7th place among the Democratic contenders. In June, Chisholm became the first woman to appear in a United States presidential debate.
At the 1972 Democratic National Convention in Miami Beach, Florida, there were still efforts taking place by the campaign of former Vice President Herbert Humphrey to stop the nomination of Senator George McGovern for president. After that failed, and McGovern's nomination was assured as a symbolic gesture, Humphrey released his Black delegates to Chisholm. This combines with defections from disenchanted delegates from other candidates, as well as delegates that she had won in the primaries, gave her a total of 152 first ballot votes for the presidential nominee during the July 12th roll call. Her precise total was 151.95. Her largest support overall came from Ohio with 23 delegates, slightly more than half of them white, even though she had not been on the ballot in the May 2nd primary there. Her total gave her fourth place in the roll call tally, behind McGovern's winning total of 1,728 delegates. Chisholm said that she ran for office in spite of hopeless odds to demonstrate the sheer will and refusal to accept the status quo.
It is sometimes stated that Chisholm won a primary in 1972 or won three states overall, with New Jersey, Louisiana, and Mississippi being so identified. None of these fit the usual definition of winning a plurality of the contested popular vote or delegate allocations at the time of a state primary, caucus, or state convention. In the June 6th New Jersey primary, there was a complex ballot that featured both a delegate selection vote and a non binding, non delegate producing beauty contest presidential preference vote. In the delegate selection vote, Democratic frontrunner McGovern defeated his main rival at that point, Humphrey, and won the large share of available delegates. On the Democratic candidates, only Chisholm and former North Carolina Governor Terry Sanford were on the statewide preference ballot. Sanford had withdrawn from the contest 3 weeks earlier. In that non binding preference tally, which the Associated Press described as meaningless, Chisholm received the majority of votes, 51,433, which was 66.9%. During the actual balloting at the National Convention, Chisholm received votes from only four of New Jersey's 109 delegates, with 89 going to McGovern.
In the May 13th Louisiana caucuses, there was a battle between forces of McGovern and Alabama Governor George Wallace. Nearly all of the delegates chosen were those who identified as uncommitted, many of them Black. Leading up to the convention, McGovern was thought to control 20 of Louisiana's 44 delegates, with most of the rest uncommitted. During the actual roll call at National Convention, Louisiana passed at first, then cast 18.5 of its 44 votes for Chisholm, with the next best finishers being McGovern and Senator Henry M. Jackson with 10.25 each.
As one delegate explained, our strategy was to give Shirley our votes for sentimental reasons on the first ballot. However, if our votes would have made the difference, we would have gone with McGovern. In Mississippi, there were two rival party factions that each selected delegates at their own state conventions and caucuses. Regulars, representing the mostly white state Democratic Party, and loyalists, representing many Blacks and white liberals. Each state professed to be largely uncommitted, but the regulars were thought to favor Wallace and the loyalists McGovern.
By the time of the National Convention, the Loyalists were seated following a credentials challenge, and their delegates were criticized as mostly supporting McGovern with some support for Humphrey. During the convention, some McGovern's delegates became angry about what they saw as statements from McGovern that backed away from his commitment to end U.S. involvement in Southeast Asia and cast protest votes for Chisholm as a result. During the actual ballot, Mississippi went in the first half of the roll call and cast 12 of its 25 votes for Chisholm, with McGovern coming next with 10 votes.
Chisholm created controversy when she visited rival and ideological opposite George Wallace in the hospital soon after his shooting in May 1972 during the presidential primary campaign. Several years later, when Chisholm worked on a bill to give domestic workers the right to a minimum wage, Wallace helped gain votes from enough Southern congressmen to push the legislation through the House. From 1977 to 1981, during the 95th Congress and 96th Congress, Chisholm served as Secretary of the Democratic Caucus.
Throughout her tenure in Congress, Chisholm worked to improve opportunities for inner city residents. She supported spending increases for education, healthcare, and other social services. She was very concerned with instances of discrimination against women, especially those against impoverished women. She also focused on land rights for Native Americans. In the area of national security and foreign policy, Chisholm works on revocation of International Security Act of 1950. She opposed the Americans' involvement in the Vietnam War and the expansion of weapon development. She was a vocal opponent of the U.S. military draft during the Jim hmm, during the Jimmy Carter administration. She called for better treatment of the Haitian refugees.
She was a forceful advocate for the Equal Rights Amendment, believing that the initial value of passing it would be in the social and psychological effects that it would have more than any economic or legal impact. She did not want the amendment modified to incorporate a provision that would permit laws that purportedly protected the health and safety of women, saying such a modification would continue a traditional avenue of discrimination against women. Regarding a specific argument made along these lines that the amendment would require women to be the subject to the draft, Chisholm was unperturbed, saying that if there were a draft, women could serve, and that some larger, stronger woman might perform the sorry. Chisholm was unperturbed, saying that if there was a draft, women could serve, and that some larger, stronger women might perform better in infantry roles than some smaller, weaker men. Gangster.
Well, she was hardcore, savage. She was savage before savage was a
That
thing.
part.
Okay. At the same time, Chisholm was aware of how much of second wave feminists in the United States focused on the concern of middle class white women, such as the adoption of the term Miss at the 1973 convention of the National Women's Political Caucus. Chisholm said that women of color were faced with double discrimination that especially affected them economically, and that the women's movement needed to make changes to reflect better such women and their concerns. At the 1973 convention of the National Women's Political Caucus, Chisholm said that women of color were faced with double discrimination that especially affected them economically, and that the women's movement needed to make changes to reflect better such women and their concerns. Scholar Julie Gallagher has written that Chisholm's pressure in this regard did make some differences in the focus of the women's movement later in the 1970s.
Chisholm's first marriage ended in a divorce, which was granted on February 4th, 1977, in the Dominican Republic. Later that year, in November 26th, she married Arthur Hardwick Jr., a former New York State Assemblyman whom Chisholm had known when they both served in that body and who was now a Buffalo, New York liquor store owner. The ceremony was held in a Buffalo area hotel. She indicated that while her legal name was now Hardwick, she would continue to use Chisholm in politics. She began spending some of her time in Buffalo, which brought some political criticism that she had been inattentive to her district.
By the mid to late 1970s, there was growing dissatisfaction with Chisholm among some liberals in New York State and city politics, who felt that Chisholm too often sided with Democratic Party bosses over liberals, blacks, or feminist challengers. Instances of this doing Instances of her doing this included supporting the incumbent conservative Democrat John J. Rooney over the liberal anti-war activist Allard Lowenstein. Lowenstein. In 1872 congressional primary, failing to support Bella Abzul's primary campaign for U.S. Senator in 1976 and New York Mayor in 1977, failing to supporting the young feminist Elizabeth Holtzman's successful primary challenge to the aging congressional incumbent Emanuel Steller in 1972. The remaining neutral during long time African American civil rights leader and elected official Percy Percy Sutton's bid in 1977 mayoral primary, followed by endorsing Ed Koch in the runoff.
This dissatisfaction was amplified by a long 1978 piece published in the Village Voice titled Chisholm's Compromises Politics and the Art of Self Interest, and written by former UDC ally Andrew W. Cooper and Voice investigative reporter Wayne Barrett. Similarly, the Amsterdam News ran an editorial about the Chisholm problem. Chisholm defended herself by saying that she was selecting these candidates who would best protect the interests of and producing government benefits for her constituents. But critics said that her behavior put the lie to the unbossed part of her slogan.
To her biographer, Barbara Winslow, Chisholm, being black and a woman, had no natural political base, and she was likely sided with the Democratic machine in order to give herself a secure spot from which to speak out on the provocative, okay, on the provocative progressive message that she wanted to put forth. A later analysis in the Washington Post framed the matter by saying that despite the celebrity stemming from her presidential campaign, Chisholm has been a lonely politician. Her unpredictability has led to an isolation augmented by her pride and paranoia.
Hardwick was badly injured in an April 1979 automobile accident. Desiring to take care of her husband and also dissatisfied with the course of liberal politics. In the wake of the Reagan Revolution, Chisholm decided to leave Congress. The possibility that she would be challenged in a Democratic primary election may have also been a factor in her decision. She announced her retirement in February 1982, saying that she looked forward to a more private life. That was a lot. I was like, I gotta read this shit again and to kind of wrap my head around it, but not fully. It just seems, I think sometimes when as people, and I would imagine some politicians are forced to do the same thing, but as people, sometimes we have to choose the lesser of the two evils when it comes to politicians. Um, I think that we have a mainly two-party system that it makes it really hard when you throw a third person into the mix. It doesn't really do anything because all it does is split the vote in favor of one or the other. And it just seems like they're kind of coming after her, just not really. This is not a deep dive, but it seems like they were really coming after her because how she puts it is she was putting the interests of her constituents over the party. So she then became a problem to the party. Do you,
I
but based on
agree.
who she put her
I
support
agree.
behind or chose not to put her support behind. Um, I hope that made sense, but I was like, oh, wait a minute. So is that what they're doing here?
It would seem that way, and I think I kind of disagree with the that what was that part that I read where they said that hold on. Yes, that's it. That's the one. The unbossed part of her slogan. I think the opposite. I think her actions was definitely unbossed. If I'm looking at it correctly, right? Let me see. Unbossed, it means you're not the boss of me. That's what I get from that, right? So I feel like then that's exactly who she is. I think she has stood true to that. Like I understand um this is a political party, but I'm still going to do what I feel is best, regardless of what y'all over here saying. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense? So I really feel like there was no lie in in the unbossed at all. As a matter of fact, I feel like what she did was put the stamp on that. Like this is unbossed. Period. I'm going to do what I feel is the better decision, whether you like it or not. And that makes it fact, not a lie.
I agree. I agree. And it's funny, like she's been an advocate of many things, but and I don't know if she's ever classified herself as a feminist, but I would say that she was likely a feminist. Um, or she stood for feminist values when it came to equality in on all planes. And feminist is not a dirty word, though I'm sure some men might see it that way because they take it to a level of different of how it's meant. And I think like from her perspective and how the way what she speaks on is the fact that she's not blaming it on men specifically, but she's saying that black men, but she is, I'm lying, black men have been emasculated, which has forced women into different roles, and that's where the equality becomes necessary. um which I think is pretty profound. And this is what in the 1970s when she's saying this.
Well, um, and I said this in a private conversation. If you really look at a lot of the situations and circumstances in which some of these speeches were made, Are we better? Yes, but some of these, her speech and a lot of the other speeches that we have went over in this is us, some of those same things are so relevant and important even now, and it makes you think. Well, it makes me think. I don't know about you, but it makes me feel like, so have we really grown as much as we think we have? Have we really evolved as much as we assumed we did? Because if that's the case, then how come those same words, those same speeches can be so relevant right now, today? And here it is, how many years later?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, so like, she was the first Black woman to win the candidacy to run in a party nomination, first Black woman to receive a party nomination within that party, the Democratic Party. And she didn't win. But we also saw Hillary run. She ain't win. Kamala ran. She ain't win either. So it's kind of like, yes, but
She's not,
no.
what you call it, ran to? What you call it, ran
Did,
to? She
did
ran
she receive
to
the,
from the Green
oh,
Party, but she did not
right.
win. From the Green
That's
Party.
right.
Remember, we don't want to leave her
What is her
out.
name?
Um,
Cynthia
thanks
McKinney.
to there we
Hmm.
go. So you know, I feel like her perspective then reigns true right now today, um, especially women
Hmm.
of color. And I'm not taking anything from any other um,
Hmm.
nationality. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that uh, we do get double.
Yeah.
We do. Um, one, we're women, and two, we're women of
Hmm.
color. So it definitely makes it, I don't want to sound ignorant because I was about to say double whammy, but
It's
take
a
that
double
shit out.
whammy.
Don't
No,
put
it
double
is
whammy. That's what
though.
I was thinking. Double whammy. Shirley Chisholm described double jeopardy. Like we charge twice for being for just being, for just existing. We're charged twice for it. Um, but I wouldn't want to be anything else. I I wouldn't want to be anything other than a woman of color,
Absolutely.
especially after um, seeing all the women of color beforehand. It just makes you like, I'm happy that my gene pool comes from somewhere in there.
Miss Chisholm was an advocate for inclusion of women on all things when it came to politics, even into the military. I thought that shit was so funny when she was.
Fire. Yeah, fire.
Oh man, what is
It's like, oh,
Here you go.
savage. Go ahead. I ain't even
She
mad.
said, let me just say it again. If there was a draft, women could serve, and that some larger, stronger women might perform better in infantry roles than some smaller, weaker men. Epic takedown. I'm just saying. It's an epic fucking takedown. Like, how do you, before takedowns were takedowns, right?
Eh, girl, that was an epic read. And she ain't even know what a read was then. They didn't even read. Girl, you
It's
read
Jasmine
that.
Crockett, bad built blonde bitch, kind of
Oh my God.
worthy.
That girl, she did that. What? Bad built,
There you
bleach,
go.
blonde, built. Wait. Bad built, bleach, blonde,
There you
butch
go.
body. There it is.
But just
That.
think, had women like Shirley, because she was like advocating for women in politics, but had it not been for someone like Shirley Chisholm, would we have had a Jasmine Crockett?
Absolutely not.
And she is.
Not only a Jasmine Crockett, but never mind. None of those other women either is what I was gonna kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Cynthia McKinney,
black
Kamala.
women
I
did it
mean, come
first.
on now, like,
Black black women did it first. Let's
yeah.
be clear. Let's be clear. Black women did it first. Because before it was Hillary, there was who? Black women did it first. And now y'all want to sit back and talk about black fatigue. Black fatigue, girl, if it and don't even know what the fuck it means.
Yeah.
For real.
And even though, like, this is going to tie into some of the stuff where they were trying to come after her, saying she was not like she was aligned with the party, where she really wasn't. Like her one of her opponents, whatever Wallace, I forget his first name, Wallace. Like they were running against each other in the primary, right? I believe, if I'm remembering my facts right. And whatever, she lost. But when he had that incident, she went to visit him and people were mad at her about it. But let me tell you what I did see. I was like, wait a minute. Was it bipartisanship or partisanship, whatever that term is, where people are working together? That within that instance, I really do think that it paved the way for that bill that she was able to bring forward later about helping. So she brought forth a bill to give domestic workers the right to manage minimum wage. And he's the guy, the one she visited in the hospital when he got pew-pewed, helped her push that forward. Having to put a bill to get domestic workers eligible for fucking minimum wage is insane. But she kind of figured what's going to be important for these people. And she said, if I got to play nice, and I'm
going to do what I got to do.
now,
I'm play nice. Play the game. That's what we call it nowadays, right?
There
Play
you
the
go.
game. You got to know how to play the game. And I think she played the game very well. And she stood true. Even though they tried to make her out to be a liar, she stood true to what she said. What was her quote? What was her? Hold on.
Unbought and unbossed.
Her. That was it. That's what it was.
Unbought
Unbrought.
and unbossed. Yeah.
And I think she stood on that. She stood on business with that, and that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
She did what was best, and not for a specific party, a specific person, but what was better for everyone futuristically moving forward. Even if you don't agree with every single thing, whatever is going to push us into progression in a positive way, that's what she did. And even if it wasn't anything that her party, and I think that's part of, I think I'm stuttering. I think that's part of the problem right now, is that everybody is loyal to a party instead of being loyal to what's going to be better for progression and moving forward, what's going to be better for everybody. Everybody has a loyalty, and honey, everybody not
Party over
loyal.
politics. We are coming down to the end, and there's one more episode to go from Oust Now Presents This Is Us. And we really appreciate you for joining us for this very special series, which this is its first season, and we plan to bring more. And we really appreciate you joining us for this journey.
Absolutely. As always, time is something that you cannot get back. And the fact that you spent some time with us, this episode, Oust Now Podcast Presents This Is Us, we greatly appreciate you, and have a great day.